so many thoughts about the
Yes.
Acolyte finale. Well, I mean, I guess in the series, now that the finale has aired, we've seen it, but just in totality about the Acolyte series. I have to say,
Hmm.
I may be in the majority or in the minority with this, but I feel like I would probably, I don't want to play completely crap on it. I would probably still give it, I wouldn't go as low as, I think if people were rating it like a 3.2 on IMDb or whatever. I wouldn't go that low. I maybe a 5, like I, and even then I'm like, is 5 being mean? And I'll tell you, my main my main issue with that show, and it was really highlighted for me in this last episode. And I don't ever like to crap on actors and actresses. I really don't. But I didn't think she was great. And especially her crying scenes really made me feel uncomfortable. And I always hate to because I always feel like it's so dramatic. They it just made me feel like you're just not good at this. Like you're not
Yeah. No.
like her crime scenes, like they were just not, like they felt so forced. And I thought that, and for me personally, that it took me out of the show. Like her acting just wasn't the best. I feel like we've seen good acting and we've seen really bad acting. I don't think she's really bad, but I just don't think she maybe was right for this particular series.
I thought that the her acting wasn't great. For me, it was less the crying and more the scenes where she was supposed to be angry. I didn't
Yeah,
feel like she was really angry, and I don't want to compare all anger and turning to
right.
the dark side to Hayden
Sure.
Christensen in Revenge of the Sith. Because even though I didn't love his performance, when he was angry and sad and confused, like I felt he was emoting well. I felt like
Right.
her facial expressions didn't match where she was supposed to be. Like when she was choking Soul, I didn't need the whole force like moving like that. But it
Right.
felt like when she was killing this Jedi who she had considered a father figure, it was just like, and she was kind of standing there. And I was like, I don't need you to like fully like
But
rageful, but I need
maybe like
more from
broken
you.
down a little bit. Like,
Yes.
right. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I can
There just
see
wasn't
that.
enough emotion to me. And that was my like
Or
I see what you're
rage.
saying, but
Like
yeah,
pure rage. Like so that way when she did bleed into the Kyber crystal,
it was
you
more
knew it was coming
people.
from a just so much rage. But like, yeah, there was just not a lot of,
I thought the scene of her bleeding it was cool. I know a lot of people
yeah.
had took issue with it. I
Why?
understand where they're coming from.
But why? Okay, so I
I
don't.
so the correct way to bleed a kyber crystal is you have to meditate, and Sith already struggle with meditating because meditating means like finding your inner peace, and like
Right.
they don't do that. So you're meditating, the crystal itself is alive, I guess you could say. So they focus all of their rage and hate onto the crystal in a meditative state, and it bleeds the color or bleeds the crystal, and that's how it turns red. Technically she was touching it, but what people are saying is that in order for you to bleed a crystal, you have to be making a cautious decision to focus your rage and stuff into the crystal to bleed it, rather than just, oh, I'm filled with anger and I'm touching the crystal and it bleeds it. I'm okay with the choice they made, but considering that Vader bled a crystal the way he did on Mustafar, and I remember he kind of struggled with it like for a brief moment, but again, things happen in books, like they change minor things here and there. But I know a lot of people were upset. I thought the visual was really cool, and I think the way they went about it was good. It was cracked, so she was kind of touching it. She
Right.
was filled with rage, so I thought it was a cool visual. But I would have liked it a lot more if she was emoting more, and it felt like she was really
Right.
filling with rage while simultaneously holding this pure crystal, and it
Right.
bleeds it. Um, but
Yeah,
and then people
I
were
can get that.
complaining that well, sorry. The last thing is people were complaining that she was mad at this father figure had lied to her, and that was enough to bleed a crystal. But Anakin slaughtering younglings, fighting his former master, how come it didn't happen then? How come his lightsaber didn't turn red? And the obvious answer is because they didn't think of it back in 2003. Like,
Right.
let's understand that there are new ideas that didn't exist then. Because if that's your logic, you must have hated the fact that R2 was able to fly in episodes 2 and 3, because then in episodes 4, 5, and 6, he shouldn't have fallen into the swamp at Dagobah, and he shouldn't have gotten stuck in the set. Like, if we're going to go that route, obviously, yes, it would have been cool to see Anakin bleed a lightsaber like during his fight with
Right.
Obi-Wan. Would have made it even cooler. But the reality is they didn't think about that, so it didn't
Right.
happen. But trying like that's when you take a step back and remember we are in a fantasy, we're watching a movie or a show.
Watching a fantasy world that is an organic thing too, that is always being added to. It is
Right.
always being written about. It is the lore is constantly changing, is an organic system
Yeah.
of storytelling where it isn't the Bible. Like it
Right.
isn't like it is there's not just one book and everybody has to refer to this one book as far as all
Exactly.
Star Wars lore. Like this is there are legends, there are like there's the
Yeah.
canon, like it is a constant evolving thing. So it's like, okay, yeah, you're right. It would have been neat, but you're right. They didn't think of it then and they didn't have it written about and they didn't conceive of it, and
Yeah.
lately they have. So why would you not, like, so anything that hasn't been written since 1970 or 1980, just nobody ever, I mean, like that
You look at
that
the Andor series when the guy like was fight he was I forget his name, but when he was flipping his ship and the lasers came out and destroyed the TIE fighters that were chasing him. It's like, oh, well, how come they didn't use that? The Battle of Endor, the Battle of Yavin. It's like because they didn't like the creators didn't
right,
think of it. Like, stop taking things that happen now and trying to say, how come they didn't put this in a movie in 1977? Like,
exactly right. You're, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, it's a perfect way to say it. It's just they didn't think about it then.
yeah,
And you have to be comfortable with the thing is new ideas have come along. They've been more they keep creating new things that come along. And if you don't like that, then stop consuming the product in general. But if you
right,
understand that it is always going to be evolving and changing in this fantasy realm
right.
where there are
Emphasis on the
laughing
fantasy.
rats, right? And big slugs that, I
Yeah,
mean, it's that live in the desert. I mean, like,
right.
like you have to be willing to be like, okay, like, hey, and instead of being like, well, I didn't, like they didn't do this. How about like, well, it's really cool that they're doing that now, that
Yeah,
they're adding more and more to everything that we know about Star Wars. Like it had never occurred to me, like how a lightsaber turns red, like if you start off with one and how, or like how Ahsoka's turned white,
yeah,
like that's like let those things happen. It's not going to ruin your life. Like,
right. Yeah.
just
So that part I thought was cool, but people complained about. But I agree 100% with Amandla, I think is how you pronounce her first name, Steinberg. It just felt like there were moments, multiple moments throughout the series where her acting performance didn't match the dialogue or the weight of the scene.
yeah, I
And
felt like she kept
unfortunately, that
lowering her
happened.
voice. Like,
Yeah, I noticed
and
that
I was
too.
just like, what are we doing here? Like, don't quit doing that. That's stop
Yeah,
it. Like,
yeah,
and I'd be like,
yeah.
no,
And it's really, yeah, it's not nothing against her, but like you said, maybe just she wasn't right
for that
for
part. That
for
and
that
that's
part.
and you that can happen. That
Yeah,
doesn't make her it doesn't make her a crappy actress. It means
right.
just for this particular thing, maybe you just weren't the right person for this role.
I thought Soul was incredible. I thought he carried the show with his performance. And the
I
fact that
thought
he learned English for
I
this
can't
role.
yeah, the guy who played Chimere,
Oh yeah, the
so
two
good.
of them.
So good. I mean,
Yeah,
that's fine. You mean you had, yeah, it just sometimes just people aren't right for a particular role. It doesn't make her bad. It doesn't make it just was like, it just, her crying scenes were just a little, they just came across as a little less authentic to me
Yeah,
than like, it just didn't feel like she did maybe a, a good between us. Is I just don't feel like she did emotion very well.
yeah, that's fair.
Which
I
is
agree
okay.
with
I
that.
mean, that is a hard thing to do, I would imagine, for an actor or actress to begin with, like to convey an emotion that you might not be particularly feeling at the moment.
Yeah,
Like we're not all, you know, Killian Murphy, or or like
right.
we're not, everybody's not that, or so it's like, fair enough. What'd you think about the Plagueis?
I have gone back and forth with that one. Obviously, there are questions of, does Chimere know he's there, and is he
Right,
his master? Does Chimere not even, does Chimere know? Is he Chimere's master, but Chimere doesn't know he's there? Or does Chimere not know he exists at all, and he's learning how to manipulate midichlorians from this situation? Like, because I think one of the good theories is Plagueis is still with, is it Tenebris?
yes,
Whoever
Tenebris.
his master was.
Tenebris.
Chimere is a splinter cell. He probably considers himself a Sith, doesn't know or care about the rule of two. So he's doing his thing. Maybe he wants to get his own and rival Plagueis and Tenebris. And from this ordeal with the, not the Nexus, the Vergence and all of that, Plagueis kind of learns how to manipulate midichlorians, which I
Sure.
think does have a lot of implications on the future of Star Wars or how the Anakin's whole thing. But I think it kind of makes sense because you had to learn it
Somewhere.
somewhere. So
Exactly.
if that is the route they're taking, I don't necessarily hate it, but I
I,
thought
I don't
that is a
either.
huge character to give 2 seconds of screen time.
Right. To a show you're not 100% sure if you're going to have a second season.
They put a lot, I was texting a friend of mine, they put a lot of stock into, we're getting a second season. Because as we've talked about, there
Right.
was a lot of threads that they did not close up, no pun intended, to the thread. And while they did answer some more questions, there were still a lot of questions that we've had that they didn't answer. And it's kind of like, the way you set this up is like you're assuming that there's a
Right.
second season coming. And
Right. And that's a risky game to play because you had a lot of things that do have implications for Star Wars
yeah, the Star
and
Wars that we know and grew up with.
right. Yeah, Star Wars in general with characters that people are aware of, and to not be able to answer, like, it's like like we had said before, is don't don't open four new storylines for every one you close.
Correct.
And you you kind again you we do now know what happened between the Jedi and the witches that were there, the coven that was there. They did answer that. Good. You do kind of understand that the twins weren't really twins, that maybe they were, that they were, obviously they were created, I don't want to say unnaturally, but I mean, you
Some would
know,
consider it unnatural.
right. Yeah. Through the coven. I mean, like, you did, I mean, you did do this. Um, but yes, for a character that I don't want to call it, well, I mean, Darth Vader is huge. He is a huge character. He
He
has
kind of sets in motion
a lot of things.
everything.
Right. I mean, like everything. Like, yeah, yeah, everything at least that has to do with Darth Vader.
Right. Yes.
Right. And so you're like, why would you have him creeping on an island now? And now, like, there's a good chance we're never going to find out, did is is Chimere his apprentice and he's looking to overthrow Tenebris? Is Chimere even aware that Plagueis is there on that island? Is he watching him think, or is Tenebris even in the situation at the moment? And you've got Plagueis looking at Chimere creeping on him, worried that Chimere's trying to find an apprentice to overthrow him, which clearly doesn't happen because it's Sidious,
Right.
who becomes his. You also have the like, okay, I mean, I know like I know they are extending ages of now people. Like they are like really drawing out how old, but again, like that's fantasy. I don't These people can live for hundreds of years. I don't care. Yoda's one of
Right.
them,
This
but
is a non-human race. Surprise, surprise. They live for 200 years and originally
right.
thought it was 80. Like that one's not keeping me up at night.
Right. Like that one's not gonna bother. Like, okay, make these people, because again, if you can put more content out there of things that are happening beforehand, like, and it makes it okay, good. Don't care about
Who was
that.
Venestra talking to when she was on the comms?
Who Because
Was she
he did
talking to
sound like
Plagueis?
Sidious.
Right. It sounded like Sidious. It really did, but I'm
It
like,
really
I'm
did.
okay with y'all changing the ages, but that one, I'm like, Palpatine
Was
was
not
not that old. Like, we're not doing that one.
like, was he like, I can't picture him as 20 years old and still having that voice, like
Right,
how,
exactly.
like, are we, and did,
And what
or
happened with her and Chimere? Clearly, she's the one that light whipped him. So, like, is she like
was that from a fight? Was she torturing him? Like,
right?
was
Is
that
she
on his way
actively
out?
Plagueis's disciple? Is she his Padawan? Like, what that's the type of stuff that like they're kind of banking on for the second season. And
Which,
I feel like that specific storyline you could have maybe introduced when they did towards the end and set up for maybe the second season. But a lot of other things like Plagueis and stuff like that, it was like, no, that's too heavy for you not to. And I mean, the thing that always bothered me, one of the things that I wondered about, we wondered about how May survived. So you see, like kind of like with Luke, she got sucked into the wind tunnel. Fine. However, was Chimere already there? Because she was too young to survive on her own. Had she been a teenager or something, she
right,
escapes, she runs away, she gets off the planet, she's out wandering. She has her powers and she doesn't know to keep her powers a secret. So maybe she comes across Chimere. Okay, but she would have needed to be older to make it that far. So how did she and Chimere
right,
meet? Because for me, if it was like she found a Jedi, it could have been more believable or explained away in the sense of like, yeah, there was a Jedi on the planet and he found her because the Jedi were everywhere. While
right.
I know that the Sith are around and there are dark force users, there aren't as many, and the dark side users are usually not too keen on bringing on
Children.
a children. Like had she been found by the Jedi and trained to be a Jedi, that one is a little bit easier to explain away. But for someone who was like 8, how did she and Chimere end up meeting up? Because again,
You're gonna have
she
to,
was
because right,
8.
and that goes back to, did um Plagueis set that coven up on the, because like I know they also, like, there was discussion about those hooded figures that were at the coven meeting and they never showed their faces, like
Oh,
during like
yeah.
their ascension, like they never, like, so was Plagueis one of them, um like, again, how much input did he have on that coven being at the place where, um I forgot the word, what's the helmet made of?
Uh
Cortosis.
Cortosis.
There you go, cortosis. Yeah,
She was right
but that's
there.
right. Like, so, and like, okay, so that place might not have had it, or like the covens might not have been on the place that had it, although it was mining. So you might kind of wonder if it did or not. But
Yeah.
clearly, the planet that he has on, that Plagueis was creeping on him, that place had cortosis.
Yeah.
Was a cortosis. Um, but it's like, did Plagueis put the coven out there to see if he could mess around with midichlorians? Like, did he have a hand in that, or did he want to see, like, stand back and watch to see if this coven could do it on their own and then kind of go in and snatch a, like these kids were like all of them, like the Clone Wars, like were these all kind of like
Yeah, but then the
beta
Jedi interrupted
testing.
the, yeah, he was going to allow the ascension to happen and then do whatever he needed to do, but the Jedi messed it up essentially.
Right. But
But
again,
there's
we
too much that we don't know for a show that needs a second season to close all of these loops. And
if it,
one thing I have heard, and I wholeheartedly agree, a lot of the recent Disney Star Wars projects, visually, I love them.
yes.
The sequel trilogy, visually, there were some great visual shots.
Yes.
Kenobi, the way the light was reflecting off people, Ahsoka in the world between worlds, this when Soul is flying through the asteroid field. They're just like certain things that visually they know what they're doing.
Oh
But the
yeah.
problem is that for a universe that has as much lore as they have, your storytelling can't be as up and down, hit and miss as it is. Visually, they have knocked it out of the park every time. The Mandalorians, like just all of the different projects they've done are incredible visually, like absolutely phenomenal. But I feel like you are putting so much into the visuals and thinking
Eh,
our story can be and it'll be fine. But it's like, no, because for a universe this expansive with the books, the comics, the movies, the TV shows,
right.
you need to put more into your storytelling. And
There's no excuse for it, especially
exactly.
with a company is I mean, is with you are lacking no resources, Disney.
Got the money.
You are not a startup company. You
Right.
can put people on effing retainer that know these these are huge things. Like there's zero excuse. Stop high. St- I don't care if you want to hire directors and writers who haven't read the comics, aren't fans, but everybody needs to have somebody on a staff on that thing that they can turn to and say, does this make sense for this character? Does this make sense for the storyline? And if it's no, well, then how can we make it that it works into this? There is no excuse because you could fund, you have, even if you didn't want to put somebody on retainer, which would be, you should, that's the least you could do.
Right.
Like, you now at this point, you have YouTube available to you.
Right.
Like, type in the character and
Type it in. That's what I do for characters. Like I have watched 30 different videos on Plagueis over the last 10 years. And then in the last 2 days, I probably watched 6 more. You don't even have to necessarily, I mean, like you said, like you can just YouTube it. And what's
right,
funny is that they've done this before because I think I mentioned it on a previous episode. The reason why Kevin Feige got to where he was with Marvel is because he was one of many producers on the set of the X-Men movies back in the early 2000s. And they literally called him the Marvel Encyclopedia because he knew everything about everything. So he told them, oh, he wouldn't do this because of this, or actually his character does this. And they were like, oh, this guy knows
right.
his stuff. So he got put in charge of more stuff and then got put in charge of more stuff. And now, like, he is Marvel. So you see having someone that knows the material, how it helps. So why not do that for Star Wars when you have all of this
Well,
information and you know there are people that would do this? You would hire literally a group of well, pay them. You could hire a group of people and that's literally their job. That is literally their
it's
job.
literally their job.
And they would love it.
I've never understood why they don't have, for those two huge entities with all of the information that's out there, that they don't have two huge staffs on both Marvel and Star Wars to tell, for them to grab a nerd and to squeeze out all the friggin' juice that they can on that
Too easy.
information. Because again, it's not so much about, I mean, it is as much about paying homage to the source material that's out there. But if you have any intention, like Marvel, the whole reason they started, like before they had gotten with Disney, was we're going to do this because we know there are people that have read the comics. Okay, so you're going
Mm-hmm.
to have people that are going to be like, cool, I've already read the comics. I want to see these characters put into live action. However, the other offshoot of that was we're going to get these people that are going to watch the movies that then are going to go read the comics that have never read the comics for the first time. And that is going to be a growing relationship between the two, and it's symbiotic, and it's going to go from there. This is the same thing. If you put out good material, can you imagine if you'd be like, if you put out something good for Star Wars and you'd be like, yeah, you know, like some of that, like when they've done with Thrawn. I'm
Yeah.
sure as soon as his character was introduced, I'm sure there were book sales that exploded with people just trying to figure out more about him that didn't know much about him.
Yeah.
Like you can be growing the, you know, you can be growing both industries at the same time, you know, hand in hand. And it doesn't, you don't have to be like so rigid that it like has to be following the comics or the books or whatever it is, just lock for lock for lock. I mean, because like the original Marvel, the Iron Man, like that they didn't, but they took enough from like people. The best thing, the most fun as somebody who reads both of them is when you find out what comics they're pulling from or what books they're pulling from to then
For
go and
sure.
read and be like, oh, okay, like this is, if you read this one, if you read it back, so you see all this play out, like the X-Men
Yeah.
97 series, you knew, like you can go back and read the comics and be like, I know they pulled just enough from issue of Uncanny X-Men issue 104 for me to know that's exactly what that episode's about.
Yep.
Didn't have to be exact, but it was enough that I was like, that's good fan, you know, that's you can pull that and I would know. And I just, yeah, it blows my mind. It, yeah, it blows my mind that you have all this information and you're like spiking the ball in the touchdown area saying, look at us, we're not hiring anybody. Like,
Right.
what are we doing? Like
Yeah.
that's not a flex.
Right.
That's the that's the opposite of
Knowing you have the money, knowing that the material is readily available, like not like you said, not just the comics for the goldfish out there. If Marvel, Disney don't have the people that want to read it, you can literally type in Plagueis, and then all of the content that is already out there, you will have 18 different creators that have summed up the
right.
entire storyline and hit all the important parts. Like it is so easy
It's so easy.
that how can you continue to not do it? And that goes for Marvel and Star Wars, which of course are both owned by Disney. So, and again, I don't want it to sound like I'm hating on Disney because, as I've said, they have done some really good things with both properties. But I'm also not going to just blindly follow,
Right.
blindly support everything they've done when I know it can be better because you've done it before.
With like with very like it can be done better and it I don't want to say seemingly easy, but it seems like it would be kind of easy to then just the bare like again, don't make up something that you could, if you googled it you could get the answer to. Don't wing it on something that's easily google. Like I always like impress upon my kids now, I'm like, you have no idea. I'm like, it has never been a dumber time with more information out there that you could easily access. Like you can Google, I mean, like, yeah, you might have to Google and you might have to read a few things to make sure that what you're reading is true to begin with. But it is, there is more information given to people now than ever has before. Like, use
100%.
it. Use it. Now, I don't want to, like, I will say the one thing I did like about this series is I am enjoying, and I'm sure maybe some people don't, but I am enjoying that they're starting to show the Jedi, like we've talked about, the Jedi more textured. It's, I mean, it goes back to like, yeah, like
I love it.
when you when you give Scott Summers a few like hiccups in his personality, like you just don't want good white knighting all the time.
Yeah,
Like, you've got to make these characters somewhat flawed, a little bit more textured. And
they're human.
I did appreciate that about this series is that it really it it again it is always going to like there's don't ever mistake, like it's always going to, the Empire is always going to be the bad guys, they're
Yeah,
always going to be the bad guys, but I think the movement away from the Deadeye are just there are no flaws, these all perfect beings, and that they don't screw up because like it's showing that like this, I don't want to say cult, but I mean like the one guy kind of like the one senator she brought
The
in,
senator,
like,
he called it. He called like he laid it out right
yeah,
there. And
he
I'm like,
pretty
he's not wrong.
he's
You
not
guys are
wrong.
going around the galaxy doing what you want when you want, and you have almost unchecked absolute power,
Right.
and no one can even step to you. Like, that is a bit of a problem. And what happens when one of you snaps? And she was, and then I mean, her cop out answer was, well, not everyone shares your ideals or whatever. And it's like, it's not really an ideal. He kind of just said, like, what happens if one of you snaps? Which,
And he, didn't you love how he used him? What are you gonna do when
yes,
he, and I was like,
when he, and what's funny about it though is, obviously he was unknowingly foreshadowing like
right,
Anakin and all of that. But if I took a step back and started like making a list in my head of all the different times it happened, but it wasn't a global, it
right,
didn't end the Jedi Order. It happened with Dooku.
right,
It happened with Barasafi when she, framed Ahsoka.
right.
I had like it has happened before. There was the Krell or whatever the guy in the Clone Wars that basically ended up killing clones. There is a long list of times where one of the Jedi has kind of snapped or reached, just gone off the deep end, but because they're a Jedi, the only people that can step to them,
And it's swept under the rug.
yeah, the only person that can step to them are other Jedi. And when they eventually do, and a lot of damage has already been done, they sweep it under the rug. And they kept doing that until the final person did it. And you couldn't sweep that one under the rug because he swept you first.
Right,
like,
because he, right, because he got you, because he got there first. That's,
like
he started wiping, he
obviously,
already, yeah, he started wiping you guys out.
exactly. Obviously, Anakin was the one they were talking about, but
Right.
Anakin was not the first one that was an unchecked space police that was going out and doing whatever they wanted.
Right.
And no one that was a non-Jedi could even say a word about it. And when the Jedi finally were like, oh, I guess we should address this. Okay. And then you wipe it from the archives and you sweep it under the rug and blah, 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 blah. They have been that way, yes. And showing them flawed and textured, not showing them as, like you said, them just not white knighting all the time, it it doesn't make them the bad guy, but it shows and adds depth to an entity. It shows the dangers of, elevating this person or group, and then showing like the steps of how we get to where we got to. Like, I absolutely love it. I That is one thing that this show
Yeah.
and just other things have really gone to show, but also makes me worried, like, why is Yoda there? Like, I realized he was alive. That's the one
Right.
person's age that like they didn't mess with because you knew he was 800 or whatever. So like
Right.
him being there made sense. But now that Venestra is going to him, it's like I am begging the writers, if you get a second season, I am begging you that she tells him like 1/5 of everything that is happening. Because if she lays it all out, it no longer, it's like Yoda, no, like no. While he was part of the Jedi that were too proud to see what was happening right under their nose, I
Right.
would hate to see him be like, "Oh yeah, I knew about that and didn't even address it." And then when episode one comes around and they mention the Sith and blah blah blah, I'm just like, yeah,
Did he,
I don't
now
know.
again, did he say that the, okay, not Yoda, but the other guy, had he said that the Sith hadn't been around for, did he say millennia?
He said a millennia.
Okay. Because that's, because like even then you still have Sidious then sitting there and telling Anakin about Plagueis, which hadn't been a millennia.
Right.
So
I would like to believe that that throwaway line was him exaggerating,
yeah,
but it's still like it's fair that the Jedi didn't know
but
because they just assumed like yeah, they're out there, but like they're not
like, wouldn't you, if
actually.
you were Anakin, wouldn't you? Because like, wouldn't you wonder how the senator knew about a Sith Lord that the Jedi aren't talking about?
I mean, maybe Sidious never technically, because Sidious could have read about him in the Jedi archives.
Palpatine.
Palpatine could have read about
Yeah.
him in the archives because I guess he said, "Have you ever heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? He was a Sith who manipulated the Force,
Right.
blah blah blah." I don't think he ever said how long ago
It's true.
it was, but yeah, you would kind of start to think like,
Well, yeah, like what's Palpatine's interest in
yeah, why did you go back a millennia to read
why are
about
you
this?
reading about Sith?
Yeah,
Like, what are you?
so
I that's that all of that has always like I just like yeah, I mean, because then you would have to assume that Yoda knows about Plagueis. Yeah, and it's like what's in the art? I mean, like there how bad are their archives? Because I mean, like you're like,
right.
okay, did you not know that the if Palpatine or Sidious Palpatine's reading stuff about Plagueis out there has to be a certain time frame that he's
I
reading
mean, because
about.
obviously Sidious didn't have to read it because he was there. He was the apprentice.
Right, right.
But yeah, when you're telling Anakin, I would have to believe the archives have it in there. And I'm sure that it
I
was
mean,
read about.
they must have been so good about keeping I mean, like them keeping it on the down low. I
And
I
I think that's one of the things that talks speaks to how good of a planner Palpatine was, because I think I was like watching videos about like how he rose to power and everything, and he knew about the rule of two and all of that, but he was able to operate, train Darth Maul, and get the army built and all of that without it. I think, and I think maybe that is where Mundi comes in handy with his. There have been splinter cells that have popped up. Maybe Sidious did just a little bit here and a little bit there, that the Jedi knew about it. Like
but
he
didn't
didn't
take
keep it
it
a complete secret, but they didn't take it seriously because they assumed this is just some splinter faction, which at the same time you're kind of like, well, you should
splinter
probably do something about it. But
right
whether
like
it's small or not, you should probably do something about it.
right like or
But it,
had they been going around putting down these like
yeah,
had they been getting in there and destroying like breaking them up before it's just yeah like I I'm it's like one of those things like yeah I'm glad that a show introduced Plagueis but did it like and I'm glad that it was also it's such a strange show because you're like I'm really glad they introduced Plagueis. I really am glad that they introduced the flaws of the Jedi. I'm really glad they introduced the creation of life in in a virgins that that the Jedi find concerning. I'm so glad that they did a lot of these things and it's like but I wish it wouldn't have been that show that did it. It's like,
fair.
and or you can say like I just wish it would have been a little bit better constructed of a show to handle such
That's that.
huge
Yes.
yeah huge huge subjects with huge
The
implications
construction
in
of the show is, of all the different things, the bleeding of the Kyber crystal, the age of
yeah
Mundi, the acting of some of the actors, like I can tell you the things I didn't like, but if you ask me to just name one thing, the one thing that you didn't like that could have fixed the show is how they constructed the show, how they
right
constructed the storytelling. Because both of us, we can criticize the other things here and there, but if you had constructed a better show, if you had better storytelling, it would have made the stories that you told so much better.
You imagine like how big this could have become with, again, with just those things. If you told
Yeah,
me there was going to be a show that was going to be like, we're going to introduce Plagueis, and we're going to introduce the Virgins, and we're going to introduce Cortosis, and we're going to introduce like life being created, and like a flawed, and a flawed Jedi, and with you'd be like, oh my God, like this is gonna be, and it just, and again, that's the reason I'm like, it's not, it wasn't nearly as horrible of a show as what people were crapping on it online about. That's, again, if you you've got to, you got to also have people on that staff that are working specifically on Disney Star Wars that are willing to sift through all the BS criticism and actually get into the things that people are saying that are like listen, we like you, and we're wanting better for you, and these are the things, like if you could just tweak a few of these things, you would
yeah.
have, it would be amazing. You've got to find somebody on your staff that can go through all the women, like get through all those,
Fire
and
in space. What? Get rid of all
right,
of those comments and find the people that still want to
watched
enjoy
it,
it, watched it, consumed it, thought about it, but had real criticisms,
right,
and take those to heart.
right.
Because there is a lot of people that feel that way. And I've had good conversations with people about it. But like we both said, unfortunately, the people complaining about the little minor things are going to drown out the real
Oh,
criticisms. And our fear is that they'll look at all of the criticisms and just throw it away.
that's right.
And that is
Is the worst
unfortunate.
thing they could do. It's the worst thing they could do, because there's some legitimate things of like, listen, it's not overly bad. If you were to have tweaked a couple of these things, like a second season, people would have been clamoring for a second season. Are you kidding? Darth Plagueis is on this island clamoring for a second season. Like,
Yeah,
what are we talking about? And explain away why they didn't know that the Sith were out there,
yeah.
or that, just watch them, just explain it away as these, like, make there's nothing wrong with portraying the Jedi as head in the sand, because you did that. You've done that so long in so many other, like,
So many other
so many other
entities.
things. So many other things. So, like, to say like, oh well, they just had their head in the sand and they were just willing to overlook all these other stuff. Fine.
Yeah,
That's not, if you tell that in a good, you can still tell that in a good storytelling way where it's like absolutely friggin' believable, because they've done it forever. Like, this is now we've got a theme, a formula of, this is what the Jedi do. The Jedi just stick their head in the sand and ignore everything else is going on, believing that they are the moral superiors here, and they keep marching on. Great. That almost at this point, that is canon. I mean,
100%.
I mean,
You literally
so
had Dooku and Barasafi say like those exact words in Attack of the Clones, the movie, and then Barasafi, when she framed Ahsoka and ended up catching her, she went on trial and literally said that, like word for word. And then you had episodes where the Jedi were going to these different planets to liberate the planets, and they talk to the townsfolk and the farmers that are being attacked by droids, and they're like, "Oh, we're here to save you." And then they have a conversation, and it's like, "Oh, you kind of see us as both on the same side." And like they break it down, and then the episode ends without like that person changing their mind. Like this has been proven
it's
for
canon.
so long.
Right. It's canon at this point. Like, that's
Why are people now looking at me? Wait a minute, the
it's
Jedi
okay
weren't
to, right.
perfect?
It's okay to come out with a season and have the Jedi explain away the signs of the Sith being
Yeah,
fine. Got no problem with it, because again, it's been going on forever now. So just at this point, that's
like
kind
you
of
said,
the
that's
things that
canon.
that's the things that you enjoy about like those kind of movies and those kind of setups, is ever at people like, listen, the signs are here. You're not paying it. I mean, the whole like, I mean, you've even got with like Infinity War and Marvel and stuff like that, where like you had even Thor, like there's a reason like all of these stones are showing up, but like we've got to figure, and that's like way back in, that's in Ultron, you know,
Yeah.
like, so there's nothing wrong with saying like, or and pointing out the fact that like people are ignoring the stuff that's here are the signs that are have here are the signs, we're not lining these up, we can't believe that you didn't get it. There's nothing wrong because you kind of want the audience being like, get it together, don't you see what's about to happen, you know, like there's nothing wrong with that. So
Yeah.
I
I
think
think
we
people
both kind
pick
of
and
agree
choose
it
with
was
that.
good but not great, but not,
Do what?
the show was like, it wasn't like, it wasn't terrible, it wasn't,
Right.
it had great things in it. Oh, that last scene between Saul and Chimera, the fight.
Oh, incredible. Just and like I know that was one of the things that kind of goes with the whole visual thing, where like they give me the awesome sets and the awesome fights, and it kind of sacrifices the story. But the lightsaber duels were incredible, and this last one did not disappoint. Like just so good.
Yeah.
The choreographers you hired that level of writer because
Yes.
those were perfect. Those
Yes.
were both fights, the episode 5 and this one. Once we lay out there have been YouTube videos for years that talk about like the top live action lightsaber duels, and I think that list needs to constantly be updated. I
Oh
think
yeah.
both of those duels
Yep.
have their place on the list. I know
Oh
some people
God.
think episode 5 was better than Revenge of the Sith. I don't think so, just because of the weight of everything
Sure.
surrounding it. Like not just Obi-Wan and Anakin fighting, but like everything that was at stake, and
Sure.
then the going back and forth between them two and the Yoda and Sidious. I think that one is untouchable. Am I biased? Sure, I'll own that. But both of those lightsaber duels in the Acolyte, phenomenal,
So
phenomenal.
good. So good. That yeah, the scene with when he throws the lightsabers and Soul
Puts them
force
and pushes them
and
back.
force
Oh,
moves, like yeah, it's
so good.
so good. So, like that that was, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's take, you need that, the level of lightsaber choreography, you need that level of writer and
Yeah,
researcher. Just like, nobody's saying you guys are bad writers, nobody's saying you guys are bad directors. What we're saying is that you just need somebody to help you. You need
yeah,
somebody to help with the with the research. Just it's that, it's literally that simple. It's literally that simple.
that's it.
Like I just, that it's that's what's so mind-blowing is you are a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah,
It's that simple. It's that you were just not hiring, like you're either willfully not doing it.
yeah. So now
I
ratings aside, I think you need to look at the views. I think you look at the ratings, but again, a lot of the ratings were getting review bombed.
right.
But you need to look at the amount of people that started the show at episode 1,
Yep.
and then look at the number of viewers at episode 8. I think as us fans, the audience, that will be our biggest indication on whether or not there will be a second season. I don't want to say don't pay attention to the reviews at all, but to me, because I know review bombing brought down the number a
Right.
lot, I want to look at the views because, to be honest, even I know a lot of people that are Star Wars creators that have spent the last 8 weeks just dragging this show.
Mhm.
But in order for them to drag the show means they turned on the show and watched it.
There's a lot of people that admit to hate watching it, but you
Yes.
still watched
So
it.
it's kind of like you can give it a 1 star. You watched it, then you watched it twice to make sure you had all of your notes down to hate on it. If the views are there, I think they get a second season.
I
I
agree
think the
because I think
views
people
don't
will,
matter as much.
I think they will want, because I think people would tune in just to see, again, you
Oh yeah,
in
you piqued our curiosity now.
right, you've
You
introduced,
showed Plagueis. Like you have to give me the second season now.
right, like you did what you, I mean, like, and even then, like, it isn't like you bombed the entire series and then you just threw out Plagueis at the end and was like,
Right.
ha. I mean,
Yes, right.
you did have moments where people were like, you know, like choreography and the Jedi story and stuff like you have those things there that were all throughout the series. So it was like again, it wasn't like you just sprung him out of a cave and was like, ha, and then like
Yeah,
you like, oh my god, now I got to watch. So you know, like I'll
you're right.
forget everything that happened. It that isn't that like you do have a solid foundation. You just need to build a better house. Like you need to build just a little bit better house, a little bit more sturdy, a little bit more stable house,
Mhm.
and you would have gold there. It would be so simple. It would be so simple.
Hate.
That's what's so
Ugh.
frustrating.
I
Oh,
think that's
so
what makes it the most frustrating because
that's
it's
what
so
makes them
simple. It's not like
so
some unfixable problem.
it again, there's so much information.
Right.
It's so simple. But we're gonna end it on that note because
Yes.
tomorrow is episode no six six. I yeah. Oh, we're getting towards the end
We are getting close.
of House of the Dragon. So yeah.
Yeah, so we've got episode 6. I will yeah,
Well,
yeah,
we're
episode
gonna say
6.
bye to everybody, and then you and I are gonna talk about your
Yes.
volleyball schedule afterwards.
Yes.
Oh, bye.
See you guys.